it's Jillian from Jilly Bean Pottery, and I wanted to take you today through a really easy intro to jewelry idea, and that's beads. So how do you make a ceramic bead, and what can you do with them? Why would you make beads? So you can certainly do it as jewelry. Here I'm wearing one of my beads on this necklace that I've made. You can certainly do it as an easy jewelry. You can do combos of beads. They're super easy to string. Make interesting creations. That way you can integrate it with other mixed media for jewelry pieces. You can use them in knitting. You can use them in crochet and add them to the yarn. You can do all sorts of things. You know, they're just great, first of all, and they're really, really fun. And I kind of think a little meditative. So I thought I'd take you through how to make beads. They're super easy. At the end, we'll discuss some options for how to glaze them easily in your kiln so that they don't stick and roll off. So we'll talk through some options there. Obviously, we can't do that today with the beads we're making today. So let me start first with what you're going to need. You're going to need some really, really simple tools. That's one of the best things about beads and why they're a really great intro project, especially if you've never done clay before. This is super accessible. This is super something you can do. Heck, do it with polymer clay if you want. Heck, do it with air dry clay and paint them, and they're not going to be as long lasting or as stable, but certainly give you the feel and experience. You don't need a lot of clay skills to be able to do these. Okay, so you're going to need a skewer. I got these in a pack of, I don't even know how many at the dollar store. Super easy wooden skewer for meat, for meat or veggies or whatever on the grill. You don't want to use a metal skewer. They're going to be too thin in my experience, and the clay might be more likely to stick to them. The metal skewer is nice because the clay will release. You'll see that there's a little bit of heft to this. It's not super skinny. You can see that there's skewers like this that are a little bit skinnier. This thicker one is a better choice. So skewer. Go to the dollar store if you need to. You're gonna need some clay. Yay. I actually have two kinds of clay. I'm gonna show you a marbling technique. And then you're gonna need your fingers. Basic bare minimums. We're gonna start there. But you might also want tools like, this is a wooden modeling tool. You can use a popsicle stick. Doesn't matter, would still work. You can use interesting found objects. This is a piece of coral. This is a piece of thread from somewhere friend found for me. I'm gonna show you a fun option there. I make a lot of my own stamps, so I'm gonna use this, but you can use, here's a smushed bottle cap that I found in the parking lot. I pick up a lot of things in the parking lot. If you follow my work, or if you've watched videos before, you'll know, or ever taken a class from me, you'll know that found objects are like a love affair of mine. I might have one of the biggest trunk drawers in the world of found objects for clay. So here's one of my latest acquisitions. I love bottle caps that have been squished in the parking lot. They have different shapes and they're really fun. So stuff like this, it doesn't have to be fancy. And as I said, if you don't have any of those things, your fingers work just fine. Okay, so let's take some clay. You want clay that's going to be a little bit soft, not too firm, because you're going to be manipulating it and rolling it. And just so you know, I'm not. Oh, this is a can. It's kombucha. So just in case you're worried that there's any, what I'm drinking is, what is she drinking or not? It's certified non-alcoholic kombucha, just so you know. Okay, so we're gonna take some clay, and the best other part of this is you don't need a ton of clay either, so it's kind of great. So you're gonna take some clay and we're gonna roll it into a ball. Okay, we'll start with here. You can make long tubes, you can make all sorts of things. We're just gonna start simple with a ball. Okay, doesn't have to be perfect. Perfection is not the goal. Okay, so you can see, nice little ball. Slight divot. Okay, you won't even know. Skewer. Clay. Stick it on the skewer. Now, why do I prefer this for those of you who are more experienced ceramics folks versus like a hole cutter? I prefer the skewer for a couple of reasons. One, here You can say I took it out and I kind of cleaned up this one edge where I burst through, and I'm gonna go in the other way just to make it a nice clean hole. The reason I prefer the skewer is now I'm gonna manipulate this and I can leave it on the skewer. So if you use a hole cutter, which could certainly be cleaner, there's some great ones out there. This is the one that I use. It has 2 ends. You're gonna wanna use the slightly larger end size. I think it's the second biggest from one of these sets. There's gonna be some shrinkage in the kiln, and as the clay dries, and the slightly larger hole actually is gonna give you more room to chain and thread the bead. So this is a bead I made on a skewer. But I personally like the skewer. You can keep it on here. It's hard to keep it on here because it's gonna potentially keep cutting. This is meant to cut. And we can manipulate this on the skewer. So really, really, really easy thing to do. Fingers. And the skewer's nice because it gives us something to kind of press against. And here I'm just pinching out the clay, turning it slightly, pinching out more clay, turning it slightly, pinching out more clay, turning it slightly, and so on and so forth. You don't want to hear the whole narrative, I'm sure. Okay, you can see it sometimes gets a little bit bigger. You can hold it up with your fingers. And there we go. Take it off the skewer. I might clean up the edges just a little with that hole. Nothing major, just, you know, nice clean edges. And bead. It's got a hole. You can see through. And it's got a fun texture, right? I do this with my fingers and a skewer. Okay, bead 1. This is where they get kind of addictive and meditative. So you can do things like that. Bead 2. It's gonna show you a couple different options. Now, just because I only pinch one way doesn't mean you can't pinch other ways. You can manipulate the clay in multiple ways. Here I am going in from 2 sides. It's just to keep the hole nice and clean, and I'll show you on the next one, it kind of breaks through a little bit, and this helps it clean up. Here we go, another bead. Things I can do with this. I can flatten this. Still just manipulating the clay. If you get a little bit of cracking, you can smooth it down. Again, the skewer is your friend to keep it kind of safe, and the whole integrity, you know. The last thing you want to do is end up with a bead where you smush the hole, right? That's not good. It's not going to help you at all. So what can I do with this? Well, I could draw a symbol on it with another skewer. When you buy these at the dollar store, you're going to get a whole package of like 50 or 20 or I don't know. So you can certainly do that. Or you could do something fun. I'll take the coral because more people can do that. I'm just gonna kind of holding it here a little bit. But like I said, the skewer keeps the integrity of the hole. So you don't have to worry about smashing that. And here, nice textured little bead. Textured bead. Look at that. That's 2. So easy. Okay. I want to show you different options. Just have fun with this. Like, I press things into them. I manipulate them, pinch them out in different ways. I'll show you one of my favorite ways to pinch them out on this one. I do all sorts of things. So, skewer, you can see I'm pushing through. And you'll see on that end, I didn't show you before, it kind of like leaves a little bit of like a explosion. So I'm gonna kind of push, on camera, Dillian, push that in, go from the other direction. You wanna clean that up a little bit. And then you'll see here I have 2 nice holes, okay? No explosion necessary, keeps that there. Another way I like to pinch these out, oh, cat hair. I have a cat. He's a studio cat when he wants to be. Here I'm just pinching little pieces out, little spikes, if you will. I'm just manipulating the clay a little bit. My finger on this side is just keeping the clay from sliding down the skewer. You'll note that as you work the clay a little bit, the hole actually loosens up, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with having a slightly larger hole. No big deal. It's gonna shrink, so you know you're not gonna go wrong. So I'm just pinching it out, and you can see, and this is just one option. Like, you don't have to like it. It's the beauty of art. But it gives you an idea of the types of things you can do. I kind of think this is kind of a fun, you know, thing. None of the spokes are too crazy, not too sharp, and it makes it super interesting. Like if you were gonna do something like this, super interesting single bead. Okay, so let's show you some things you can do beyond that. Okay, so we're gonna take some clay, and this time we're gonna roll. You can see I took more clay than I had. I'm gonna roll. This is where you want softer clay. I'm not using the softest clay possible. You should. Okay. And I just tapped my ends on the table here. My camera setup is not so much that I can show all of those aspects right now and have you still hear me, so sorry about that. But you can see I rolled it out, and I have kind of a long clay. Okay. Same thing. I'm gonna poke this through. And I'm just kind of twisting it. Take your time. You don't have to like rush with this whole thing. You can see here I just have a start of a thing through. I'm actually gonna do a hole slightly to the side of that so that I have a better in the center hole. And now I have that on here. And because I took my time and I didn't have that push out, now the next thing I'm gonna do, because I kind of like this idea of a more rustic look. If you do get some dryness like this, you can take a little bit of water on your finger and smooth that into the clay. You can trim. Nothing in clay is hard and fast. You can trim. I'm going to trim on this side too. And I'm using a little ceramic knife, but you could use a paring knife. Doesn't matter. Okay. I have done whole clay projects literally with plastic knives and forks. So trust me, you're good. Anything goes. Okay. I'm not saying that I don't have a lot of tools, because I do. And then I don't love my tools, because I do. But you don't have to have fancy tools to do clay. Okay, so now I have this thing. It's not perfectly shaped. That's okay. Whatever. You can spend your time on this, but you can see I've kind of evened it out a little bit. And I can do different things. Like I could take this and I could just roll it to make a line. I could take something like, I told you I have the biggest trunk drawer ever, right? Found object. I won't even tell you what this is. I found it on the street. Cleaned it thoroughly. Super important. And you could take it and you could roll your bead on it. Nothing that says your bead can't be rolled on things. Sometimes you have to manipulate how you're holding this. Again, you have the beauty of the skewer. Sometimes I'll roll things before they even go on the skewer, but you can see here I have this nice, there was some red clay on there, but I have this nice kind of rough texture on it. A bead there. I might trim this a little more. Just to pretty it up a bit. best ways, I'm not a big fan of water and clay. It has its purpose sometimes, but one of the best ways is to not so much get the clay wet as to get your finger wet, or this is a small piece of a makeup sponge. They smooth really well, so they add the least amount of water. But you can see now I have this nice bead, cleaned up edges. It's gonna make a nice necklace, or I don't know. This could be a button on a scarf. I don't know. Okay, I'm not a knitter, so that's probably up to you guys who are knitters. Okay, so I want to show you two more things, two more buttons options. And you might be like, oh, well, what else? Really, the sky is the limit here. So after I show you these two options, make sure you just play. There's no wrong way to do buttons. Okay, so I'm going to show you two more, and then we'll talk lazy. Okay, so here I'm going to, again, take a big piece of clay, and I'm going to make a big ball, super big. I love these. These are my favorite beads. They're kind of rustic looking and kind of wonky, but I love them. Love them. Skewer, as always. Skewer. Poke. Take your time. You can see here I stop at that. Pull it out. I can go in the other way. Okay. Skewer. Texture tool. Or sidewalk pavement, tree bark, whatever. Texture tool. This is where you want soft clay. You can see mine's breaking a little bit. I kind of consider that part of the charm, but you may feel differently. And I am just pushing this in to the piece. These are my new favorite things. Okay, but I have the skewer in there, so it's okay. All right. Isn't that cool? Oh my God, it's so cool. I love it. Now you could trim this up. I'm gonna just trim the side. And this is solid clay that I'm cutting through, so you're not gonna be exposing a hole in the middle, right? This was a solid ball of clay except for where the skewer is, so it's just I can clean that up, right? Okay, same thing on the other side. Now I'm cutting into my hand. Don't do that. It's kind of dangerous. I know this knife really well, and I know I'm not gonna cut myself. Don't try this at home. I want you to be safe. Cut it against the table. Okay. That. Now you could certainly cut this not square. I'm kind of making this a little square. I kind of picture like sidewalks when I'm doing this. I will tell you that I've usually left these kind of like rough and kind of crazy before, but I thought, you know, for the video I'd clean it up a bit. And again, it's okay because I have the skewer. So the skewer is protecting the hole that I'm gonna need. Okay, get a little water. I didn't make that a requirement because I'm not a huge fan of water, but I am gonna quickly clean this up. How cool would this look as a focal point on a necklace? It's basically a pendant. Basically a pendant. With the chain going through it. I love these. I love these. Now, if you're wondering, those of you who are familiar with clay, drying time, you know, you want to think it's not that thick. It seems thick, but it's not. Anything that is thinner than your pinky finger is okay. Your finger, so this is thinner than my finger. It's about my finger. It's okay. The best thing about beads is they don't need any babying while drying. So a lot of times when you dry clay, you have to baby it so it doesn't dry too fast. You don't have to with beads. Just let them dry. They're solid clay. There's no attachments. There's no things like that. I mean, I suppose you could get crazy like that, but then it's no longer really a bead so much. I don't know. Now, some other options you could do. You can make a bead. For those of you who are going to get fancy, you could take some slip and you could slip trail on them. You could do curly cues. You could do dots. You could do all sorts of things like that. You could leave them bare, underglaze them to give them some color. I will say, I'm going to show you one more bead after we have this glazing conversation. I will say glazing can be kind of a pain in the butt. Now, another thing I love about this bead, I'm only going to glaze the front. Leave the black bare. So here we go. I'm just going to lay this flat on the kiln. It's safe. No big deal. But what about a bead like this, right? So there's a couple of options. You can buy a bead rack. And this is where it starts to get not so beginner ceramics. You can buy a bead rack. And a bead rack is super great. It's wonderful. You just really, really want to make sure you buy a bead rack for the temperature that you're firing to, because the metal rods and things like that all obviously need to, stand up to the temperature you're firing to. The other thing you can do is you can leave them bare. Like I said, you could paint them with underglaze or something like that, and leave them bare and color them that way. You can also take kiln wash, and kiln wash that has set up a little bit. You can buy kiln wash at most ceramic supply stores. You can make it. There's recipes online. If you let it set up a little bit into what's called wadding, okay, where it's almost like a clay, soft clay-like substance, you can form with your wadding, not with clay, with your wadding. And wadding is essentially dried up kiln wash. I can do a video on that if people are interested. But you're going to take your wadding, because it looks like clay, and you're going to make yourself a little bit of a teeny tiny cone. And I've done this. That's how this bead was fired. This is how I fire almost all my beads. You make a teeny tiny cone of the wadding, and then you leave where it's going to touch the wadding unglazed, and you balance the bead like that. Now you're probably thinking, oh my God, how do you get all those in the kiln? What I would do is I would glue these to like a flat piece of clay that I was just sacrificing through, glue them with Elmer's glue. And you could put a little bit of Elmer's glue here and glue these on. So you can Elmer's glue these together to make it easier to transport in the kiln so they don't fall off while you're doing that. But the wadding, and this is clay. In this example, this is clay. So you get actual wadding, which is again, is kiln wash firmed up. And you can fire them on little stands, and it works really well. I've had great success with it. Like I said, I fire all my beads that way. I didn't think to bring wadding with me, but I'll do just like a glazing video maybe separately. The third option, like I said, is to leave your beads free of glaze. So that's an option. And you can also do things like, one thing we haven't talked about, and I do have some darker clay here, is you can do, one, you could use a darker clay. Two, you could use a lighter and darker clay and do a little bit of marbling, right? So you have the two colors, or you could use just a darker clay that you like how it fires. And, when you start to do something like this, now all of a sudden, do you need to glaze this, right? When you just have the, colors of the clay working together. Maybe not. So that's another option, is to use your materials wisely and use different clays, do some marbling, stuff like that. Beads are so much fun. They're super accessible. Kids can help you with them. All you need are some skewers and really your fingers, objects around your house, and have some fun. Thanks so much. See you guys next time.